Somewhere in the last few weeks, a question started circulating online. Who is investigating Joni Lamb's death? Not what did she die of, not how is the family doing. Who is investigating it? That's a specific kind of question. It doesn't just ask what happened.
Who is investigating Joni Lamb's death? What the record actually shows. Over the past few weeks, a question started circulating online. Who is investigating Joni Lamb's death? Not what she died of, not how the family is coping. Specifically, who is investigating it? That's a particular kind of question. It doesn't just ask what happened. It implies something is actively being looked into right now, by someone, for some reason. So today calls for something simple, checking the actual record and reporting exactly what is and isn't confirmed. A question like that deserves an answer grounded in documentation, not momentum. What this isn't. This isn't an attempt to dismiss the questions people are asking, because grief and confusion often travel together, and it's entirely fair for people who cared about this ministry to want clarity. It's also not an attempt to manufacture a mystery where the record doesn't support one, just because mystery draws more attention than plain fact. What follows is a walkthrough of exactly what's been said, by whom, and what hasn't been said at all, so conclusions can be drawn from documentation rather than borrowed from someone else's speculation. Why stories like this tend to grow. Understanding why a story like this spreads the way it has matters before diving into specifics. When a public figure dies and the organization around them doesn't share every detail, silence often gets read as significant, but it shouldn't always be interpreted that way. Families have entirely ordinary reasons to keep medical details private. Grief, obviously, but also simple respect for a loved one's own wishes about what stays private. Silence isn't evidence of anything on its own, but it does create a vacuum, and vacuums tend to get filled, usually by whoever speculates the loudest and fastest. That's essentially what happened here. In the days following the announcement, before any detailed medical information existed anywhere on record, specific claims about a cause began circulating. Not from the family, not from the organization, but from online commentary filling a gap nobody with actual knowledge had filled yet. Once one version of an answer starts circulating, it tends to get repeated as though confirmed, simply because repetition can feel like verification even when it isn't. This pattern is worth recognizing because it shows up in other stories too. A public figure dies. The official statement stays vague, sometimes deliberately, sometimes just because grieving people aren't thinking about messaging in the first 48 hours. Into that vagueness comes a claim, usually specific and dramatic, usually attributed to no one in particular. That claim spreads faster than any correction ever could, because corrections tend to be boring while specific claims aren't. Eventually enough people repeat it that treating it skeptically starts to feel unreasonable. This isn't a description of anyone's dishonesty. It's simply how information tends to move when nobody slows down to verify before sharing. Why specific claims spread faster than vague truths? The mechanics matter. A specific claim, even an unverified one, gives people something concrete to hold on to during a moment that otherwise feels shapeless. A vague statement about serious health matters doesn't satisfy the desire for an actual answer. A named condition does, even when that name came from nowhere solid. So the specific claim spreads not because anyone verified it, but because it's simply more satisfying to repeat than the honest, unglamorous truth, which is usually some version of "we don't fully know yet." There's a second layer worth noting, one that tends to appear specifically around deaths that follow public family conflict. When someone dies amid an old family dispute, the death itself often gets absorbed into whatever narrative was already circulating about that dispute. If the existing narrative involved hidden motives or concealed information, an unexplained cause of death fits neatly into that framework, regardless of whether any actual connection exists. The family conflict doesn't cause people to invent a death mystery from nothing, but it does make existing vagueness more likely to be read as suspicious rather than simply private. That matters, because the real question isn't only what happened medically, it's also how much of what's being repeated is being shaped by a story that already existed before anyone was sick at all. From what happened to who's investigating. One more piece of this pattern is worth understanding before getting to the record. Once a claim about a cause of death starts circulating, the question people ask tends to shift over time, from "what did she actually die of" to something with a very different implication. Who is investigating this? That's a significantly bigger claim than the first. It doesn't just ask for information the family hasn't shared. It implies that some official process, whether law enforcement or a medical examiner, is actively looking into the circumstances of the death right now. That kind of claim deserves the highest standard of verification before repeating it because it's no longer filling a gap. It's asserting that something specific and serious is currently happening on the record, regardless of whether anyone can point to who's actually doing it. None of this is really about one death or one family. It's about a habit many of us have slipped into without noticing, treating the most dramatic available version of a story as the most likely one, simply because it's the version encountered first or repeated most often. That habit doesn't require anyone to be lying. It just requires enough people in a hurry, and enough silence from those who actually know the answer, or a gap to fill itself in with whatever's loudest.
On May 7th, 2026, Daystar Television Network's official statement, published on their own website and shared on social media, said this: "With heavy hearts, we share the news that Joni Lamb graduated to heaven this morning."
The actual documented record. Now, for the specifics. Everything from here forward is sourced and verifiable. On May 7, 2026, Daystar Television Network's official statement, published on its website and shared across social media, announced that Joni Lamb had passed away that morning, expressing confidence that she was in the presence of Jesus, reunited with Marcus, and receiving reward for a life lived in surrender to the Lord. That statement contains grief, faith, and comfort, but zero medical information. No diagnosis, no cause, nothing. According to multiple national outlets, including the Associated Press and NBC News, Daystar's statement described Joni Lamb as having dealt with serious health matters that she chose to face privately, along with a back injury the network said compounded those existing challenges and led to what they described as a more serious medical situation than anyone had anticipated. That is the entirety of what the organization itself has ever said about her health, a general reference to serious matters and a specific reference to a back injury as a complicating factor. No named diagnosis. Fortune's coverage at the time stated plainly that a cause of death was not released. Where the specific claims actually came from. So where did the more specific claims come from? The ones widely visible in comment sections under videos about this story. According to reporting from the Hindustan Times, a claim that Joni Lamb's cause of death was bone cancer began circulating from a Christian streamer, not from Daystar, not from a family member, not from any medical source. That same reporting noted that the streamer who originated the claim acknowledged it was not, in their own words, fully confirmed. A separate fact check published shortly afterward reviewed the available reporting and reached a clear conclusion. No independent source had confirmed a specific cause of death for Joni Lamb. The bone cancer claim specifically remained unverified at that time, repeated widely but never independently established by any outlet covering the story. It's fair to note that a fact check from May isn't necessarily the final word months later. It's possible more specific medical details entered the public record afterward through channels this particular review didn't have access to, and if that's the case, it's worth following up on and reporting plainly. What can be said as of now is that the origin of the claim most commonly repeated as settled fact was, at the moment it first spread, explicitly acknowledged by its own source as unconfirmed. Is anyone actually investigating? Now to the question this piece opened with: who is investigating Joni Lamb's death? A search was conducted for any named source, law enforcement statement, or official record indicating an active investigation into the circumstances of her death. None was found. No county medical examiner statement, no police department release, no family attorney announcement, nothing on record from anyone with actual standing to open an investigation confirming that one exists. That doesn't mean something of the sort could never happen. It means that as of this recording, the specific claim embedded in that question, that someone, somewhere, is actively investigating her death, has no verifiable source behind it.
Months later. It's possible that more specific medical details became part of the public record after that initial period, through channels this particular investigation didn't have access to. If that's the case, we'll follow up and tell you plainly.
Fairness in the other direction. Fairness has to run both ways here. Jonathan Lamb's wife, Susie, has publicly stated, according to reporting from outlets including Entertainment Weekly and The Economic Times, that the family wasn't informed promptly after Joni's death, and described feeling angry about how they learned of it. That's a real, named, on-the-record statement from someone with direct standing to make it, and it deserves to be taken seriously rather than dismissed for complicating. A tidier version of the story. A family feeling shut out of how they learned about a death is a legitimate grievance, entirely separate from whether a formal criminal or medical investigation exists. These are two distinct claims, and conflating them does a disservice to both. The honest summary. Here's where the record actually stands. Daystar's official statement never disclosed a specific cause of death. National outlets covering her death confirmed that no cause was released. A specific claim about bone cancer originated from an unverified source who acknowledged as much himself, and a subsequent fact check found no independent confirmation of it. Separately, a family member has gone on record describing feeling shut out of how they learned about the death, a real and documented grievance in its own right. And as for whether anyone is formally investigating the death, no named source confirming that anything of the kind exists could be located. What Scripture says. There's genuine wisdom here about the responsibility of searching out a matter before speaking on it. Proverbs 25:2 states that it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the honor of kings to search it out. That verse cuts two ways, and both matter here. Some things genuinely aren't ours to know, and a family choosing to keep certain matters private during grief isn't automatically concealing something shameful. But where a matter can actually be searched out, where there's a real record to check rather than just a feeling to repeat, the responsibility is to do the searching rather than settle for the first satisfying-sounding answer. Exodus 20:16, part of the Ten Commandments, states simply that one should not bear false witness against a neighbor. That commandment wasn't written for courtrooms alone. It applies to exactly this kind of moment, when a claim about someone, true or not, spreads faster than anyone can verify it, and repeating it starts to feel harmless because everyone else is doing it too. Repeating an unconfirmed claim as though it were settled fact is its own small act of false witness, even when no real harm is intended. Where this leaves us. This isn't a claim that Joni Lamb's cause of death is a mystery hiding something sinister. Nothing in the actual record supports that framing. It's also not a claim that the bone cancer story is definitely false, since that standing doesn't exist here either. Only the standing to report where the claim came from and what has and hasn't been verified about it. What can be said plainly is that a claim which began as an unconfirmed statement from an unnamed streamer has, in some corners of this conversation, hardened into something treated as settled fact, and that a separate question about who might be investigating her death currently has no named source behind it at all. Searching out a matter takes longer than simply repeating one. It's worth the extra time. Thank you for watching The Celebrity Vault.